Brand new season, brand new dawn for
Box.
and it's lights out and away we go.
I was really enjoying that last in.
Welcome back to Box Box. This week we are talking United States Grand Prix. And this week saw the return of none other than Daniel Ricciardo himself. Hence, my Danny Rick shirt. But not only did this week see Danny Rick return to the grid, it also saw Maxi Taxi take his 50th career win and his 15th win of the season in our 5th sprint weekend of the season. Logan Sargent managed to secure his first points in Formula One on home soil, securing Williams' only double points finish of the season so far. And once again, Alfa Romeo were lacking pace. But the ultimate highlight of the weekend, in my humble opinion, was seeing F1 Academy televised for the first time for their final race of the season, which saw Marta Garcia crowned the inaugural F1 Academy World Champion. So absolute sincerest congratulations to her. Well done. Phenomenal effort. Not just to her, to all the girls who competed this season. It's an incredible achievement, and they've all made leaps and bounds for women in motorsport and just made history in general. So props to them. They've done an amazing job. But first, before we dive into how everyone performed, let's address the elephant in the room, shall we? The disqualification of Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc from Sunday's Grand Prix, which saw the duo stripped of their respective P2 and P6 positions, costing both drivers and teams valuable points. So, what actually happened? Well, after the race, the FIA randomly selects cars to be inspected to ensure that they are compliant with the sporting regulations. And in Austin, they decided to pull the cars of Lewis Hamilton, Charles Leclerc, Max Verstappen, and Lando Norris for an inspection on the floor and the plank wear. And if you have no idea what that means, that's fine, because I'm about to tell you. And if you do, well, I'm going to tell you anyway. Skip this part, feel free. The plank under the car. Let me bring out my props. If you're watching the video, this may be helpful. If not, sorry. Under the car. This is the underneath of my car here, right? There is a skid block that runs up the middle. It was introduced to the sporting regulations in 1994 to make sure that the cars weren't running too close to the ground, per Article 3.5.9e of the technical regulations. The thickness of the plank assembly measured normal to the lower surface must be 10 millimeters, give or take 0.2 millimeters. So you can have up to 0.2 millimeter of wear throughout a race. But it must be 10 millimeters when brand new. 9 millimeters may also be accepted due to wear, and conformity to this provision will be checked at the peripheries of the designated holes. What does that even mean? Well, teams are allowed a 1 millimeter exception for running once the cars enter Parc Fermé. So from the start of qualifying to the end of the race, they're allowed to go through 1 millimeter of wear. Any more than that, it is deemed to be a breach of the rules, which is exactly what happened to Lewis and Charles, who were both given a standard penalty for that breach, which is equating to disqualification. So, how did this happen? Well, it appears that the FIA, in all its wisdom, did not take into account the physical wear on the car when changing the format of the sprint weekend and placing the cars into Parc Fermé on a Friday after qualifying, meaning the wear on the plank and the skid block is greater than on a non-sprint race weekend, where the cars enter Parc Fermé on a Saturday afternoon. The setup of the weekend, combined with the bumpy nature of COTA, ultimately resulted in wear not being noticed by teams prior to the race. And ultimately, the onus is on them to make sure that the car is compliant before they go out. This now raises the question that if 50% of the cars inspected were found to be non-compliant, shouldn't the rest of the cars on the grid be inspected? I mean, it's likely that if Charles and Lewis' car was non-compliant, then Carlos and George's cars are also likely non-compliant. If the teams didn't have the time to make the inspections and the necessary changes, like they claim, for those two. It's also likely that if these two teams didn't have the resources and the time to make these checks and changes, other teams that have less personnel, funds and parts would also be non-compliant. It's not a fun time. The FIA clearly did not think that through. Changes to this may be seen in 2024, but given that this is fifth sprint race of the season and the first time we've seen it, it may just be they were running low on parts. But anyway, let's dissect the performances, shall we? Red Bull arguably had the best weekend that they've had in a while in the US. This weekend, we saw Max and Checo, the closest they have been in qualifying since Monza. And that's solely because of the uncharacteristic error by the three-time world champion, which saw his lap time deleted for exceeding track limits, nullifying his lap time that otherwise would have put him on pole. Checo's qualifying position of 9th is an improvement on last week's performance in Qatar, given he was able to get into Q3 within 3 places of his teammate. Max was able to redeem himself by snagging pole in the sprint shootout, and Perez also managed to get into SQ3, but was, however, nowhere near his teammate. Unsurprisingly, Max was unstoppable in Saturday's sprint, from pole claiming the win, while Perez was able to secure some decent points in 5th. This form carried through to Sunday, where thanks to the disqualification of Lewis, Checo was able to claw back some valuable points in his fight to maintain 2nd in the championship with a 4th place finish. And in case you hadn't guessed it, Max finished on top once again for his record-breaking 15th win of the season. Man can't stop breaking his own records. I was, however, a little mad at him, given he didn't take into account my request from a few weeks ago to let Lando have a win. But these things happen. Mercedes weekend started off great. Both cars making it through to Q3 and SQ3, seemingly setting themselves up for a decent points finish. And all seemingly went according to plan, even if George only managed to score a single point in the sprint. But a point's a point, and every one of them counts. And he did manage to bag a decent amount on Sunday with his 5th place finish. Lewis, however, well, we know what happened there. What could have been a decent points haul and closed him in on 2nd in the championship was not meant to be this weekend. But Toto and the team took it on the chin, took like champs, and said that they will learn from this and not let it impact them over the next 2 weeks in Mexico and Brazil. And honestly, I think that's a great mindset to have. It's a crappy situation, an oversight on their part, and being disqualified and losing a P2 and a podium, a trophy, is definitely not a great situation. But ultimately, they conceded that the findings by the technical team were correct. They copped it on the chin. Time to move forward over the next 2 weeks. Nevertheless, great drive by both of them and an otherwise great weekend for the team. It was a missed opportunity, but it shows that the potential for them to do great things moving forward is there. Ferrari. It was a decent quali for the Scuderia this weekend. Charles was on pole, Carlos in P4, and then then sprint qualifying happened. Charles P20, Carlos P3. In sprint qualifying, we had Charles in P2, Carlos in P6. I mean, Charles managed a P3 in both the sprint and the Grand Prix, so props to Charlie boy. Carlos, however, did not improve on his qualifying positions in either the Grand Prix or the sprint, but he was able to maintain them, which I think is a positive. The one stopper, though, for Charles in the Grand Prix absolutely ruined his race and any slimmer of a hope that he had for a win. And he was actually quite fortunate, quite lucky to get a podium. I think this was probably the only time luck was in his favour this season so far. The call to do a one-stop was more disastrous than usual from the pit wall, and it absolutely ruined his race. There's clearly an obvious tension between him and the team, calling for a debrief and a discussion over the radio about why this course of action was chosen, only then to go on and be disqualified. So yeah, please someone check on their mental health, because Ferrari are doing the absolute most to make sure it does not exist. McLaren. Lando came out and qualified P2 for the third time this season, and Oscar qualified in P10, so a double Q3 appearance by the boys in Papaya. Lando managed to convert his P2 start to yet another podium. However, Oscar was forced to retire 10 laps into the race after a collision with Esteban Ocon. The sprint shootout saw Lando qualify in P4 and Oscar in P5. Once again, another SQ3 appearance by both Papaya boys. Lando managed to maintain position across the sprint race on Saturday afternoon. However, Oscar did struggle a little bit and subsequently lost 5 places, finishing in 10th and just dropping out of the points, because there's only points for top 8 in a sprint. Unfortunate for him, but ultimately it was a strong weekend. For Lando, Oscar struggled a little bit with the circuit, given that he had never been there previously, so that's to be expected. And saying that though, he was still the best rookie on track, as always. Sorry, Logie. But not really. You at some point you have to accept the performance isn't that great. It's on par with what a rookie could be doing, but yeah, no, sorry, Logan. Aston Martin. This really was not their weekend, and they were lacking across the board. The time came for Fernando's top 10 qualifying streak to be broken, and for the first time this season, he failed to get out of Q1, only managing to qualify in P17. Lance also managed his 5th straight Q1 knockout with a P19. But hey, both ended up starting the GP from the pit lane, so I guess it did get worse. Things did slightly improve in sprint qualifying, but with both drivers being knocked out in SQ2 instead, with Fernando in P12 and Lance in P14. And then they managed a P13 and a P20 during the sprint race itself. The Grand Prix, it wasn't much better. Fernando failing to finish because of a suspension failure, and Lance still managed to save whatever sliver of the hope that the team had to score some points, finishing the race in P7, which is an amazing accomplishment given that he did start from the pit lane. So props to him. Hopefully scoring points for the first time since the summer break is just the confidence booster that he needs moving forward and going into the rest of the season. Alpine. Both drivers managed a Q3 appearance. Props to them. Gasly qualified in P7, while Esteban Ocon managed P8, with a 4th row lockout for the Alpine boys. On to sprint shootout. Ocon was knocked out in SQ2, only managing a P13, while Gasly made it through to SQ3, but only managed 10th. So still not a lot separating the two. I'd actually probably say they're the most evenly matched on grid this weekend so far. In the Grand Prix, Gasly managed to convert his P7 to a P6 finish, bagging some much needed points for himself and the team. However, Esteban failed to finish the race after colliding with Oscar on lap 10. Man was taking out his own teammate and his former and prospective teammates all season. Like, get it together, my dude. Anyway, Pierre also managed to carry their Saturday points haul, finishing the sprint in P7, while Ocon managed P11, which wasn't even close to the points, but it was still an improvement on his qualifying performance. That's all I really have to say about Alpine. Williams. It was a mixed weekend for the team. Alex only managed to qualify P18 and Logan P20 for the Grand Prix. Alex managed to improve for the sprint shootout, qualifying P9, making it through to SQ3, but Logan was once again unable to get off the bottom of the grid with P20. In the sprint, Alex narrowly missed out on bagging some points, finishing in P9. And while it's not ideal, it is a great improvement, because while he didn't make up any places, he didn't lose any. So, positives. Logie also managed to gain a position and finish the sprint in P19. So that's progress. Progress is progress, and we're not going to shit on progress. This was probably arguably their best Grand Prix of the year, though, given that they managed a double point finish, with Alex in P9 and Logan in P10, thanks to Lewis and Charles' disqualification. So it wasn't all that bad, for them at least. Plus, it also meant that Logan managed to score his first F1 points on home soil, the second rookie of the season to do so. So congrats to him, he worked his butt off for it, and while he may not have been in the top 10 otherwise, he did get himself in a position to benefit from the downfall of others. And I admire that. AlphaTauri. My team of the week. The return of Danny Rick. It was a wonderful weekend. Danny came out of the blocks and managed to qualify P15. He made it to Q2. Improvements. Well, Yuki was also knocked out in Q2 with a P11. So not bad. I'd say pretty on par, especially coming back from a broken hand. The sprint shootout also saw another decent performance from Danny, who qualified in P11, while Yuki only managed a P19. So he's come back, he's outqualified his teammate in the sprint shootout. Proud of him. Neither managed to score any points, though, in the sprint, with Danny losing a position to finish in P12, while Yuki made up 5 places to finish in P14. So, I mean, not bad to come out and beat your teammate first race back from a broken hand in a sprint race. And then on Sunday, the team managed to score some points, thanks to Yuki, who finished in P8, beating his teammate, because unfortunately, Danny Rick only managed P15. And while he didn't gain any places, he also didn't lose any, and I'm taking that as a positive because he can only improve from here. Alfa Romeo. This is one of those rare occasions where both Alfa Romeo cars made it out of Q1 in quali, with the Zhou out-qualifying Valtteri in P12 and P13 respectively. The status quo remained the same in the sprinter shootout, where Valtteri failed to get out of SQ1 and qualified P18, while Zhou managed to get to SQ2 but only managed P15. In the sprint itself, Valtteri managed to gain 2 places for a whopping P16 finish, while Zhou lost 2 places for a P17 finish. So, no points being scored there. Not even close. And things most certainly did not improve on Sunday, where they again didn't score any points. Shocker. And the most they achieved was switching positions of their drivers, with Valtteri finish in a P12 and Zhou in P13. Overall, it was a pretty mediocre weekend, teetering on that of bad. And I can't say that I saw a whole lot of either driver on track. Because for that, again, you have to do something. So, overall, disappointing from Alfa Romeo. And last, we have Haas. It was a rare weekend where K-Mag actually outqualified Hulk and got out of Q1. He managed P14 in quali, while Hulk managed P16. Typical Grand Prix weekend for them, I'd say. Both drivers failed to get out of SQ1, and Hulk again outqualified K-Mag in P16 and P17, respectively. Neither scored any points in the sprint, with Hulk managing to gain 1 whole position for a P15 finish, and K-Mag went backwards for a P18 finish. Sunday was more promising for the team, with both drivers making up positions thanks to the weekend's disqualifications. Hulk finished the race just outside of the points in P11, while K-Mag finished in P14. And other than that, similarly to Alfa Romeo, didn't really see a whole lot of them over the weekend, because they didn't really do a lot. So, yeah, this has been my US Grand Prix review. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. This has been another episode of BoxBox. Make sure to like, subscribe, follow, all of the fun things, and I will catch you in the next one.